guys, and welcome to another how-to tutorial. This time we are looking at the lasso tool, layer masking and layers. So in the last episode we briefly went over what the lasso tool does. This episode I'm going to go into a little bit more detail about them, demonstrate what they do, as well as how layers work and how to layer mask. So to start off with, we will go to where the lasso tools are, and as you can remember last episode, in order to get the options up for all the different types of lasso tools, you need to click and hold down. Now usually it will automatically be on this type of lasso tool, but as I was working on a different project, it was on the polygonal lasso tool instead. So there are three different types of lasso tools. There is the regular lasso tool, which gives you the ability to freehand draw shapes. So you can draw circles, you can draw little blobs and stuff like that. This is useful if you are working in like an Illustrator type project or a graphic design type project. I don't often use this tool, especially with a mouse. It's definitely more beneficial to use a graphics tablet with this tool, but again, really useful if you are working on design or illustration. Holding down again, you can click on the polygonal lasso tool. Now I was using this recently for a poly portrait video for my students, which will come out in a few weeks, but this gives you the ability to draw straight lines to create areas where you can work in. So you can do triangles, you can do squares, you can do absolutely anything. Now with this technique you can only do straight lines, but you can do as many straight lines as you want, so you don't have to do just a few. You could do any variety of shapes, anything you would like with this one, but this just works in straight lines. Now following on from that, we have the magnetic lasso tool. Now what this does is it tries to attach itself to areas where it thinks you might want to lasso. So for example, I could work my way around the Joker's face and the collar, and it will try and differentiate. Sometimes it doesn't quite work depending on the areas of contrast. But for the most part it's quite intelligent and is able to differentiate between different layers, but also types of contrast. Now this automatically pinpoints areas where it will attach itself to. Obviously you can click and place a lasso where you would want it to, but this is really useful if you have something on a white background or something that has a lot of contrast. And as always, if you take a selection of an image and you want to get rid of it, you can either click on the background to start another one, or you can click select and deselect to go back to normal. Now remember, this is a troubleshooting exercise as well. If for some reason you are trying to edit a photo and it's not working, it might be that you have a small portion of your image in a lasso, so always make sure you do that first before you start to worry. Now today I'm going to show you how different layers work. I am working with a Photoshop document from a previous tutorial on torn paper, so if you are interested in having a go with this technique, then please do check it out. But this is my layers bar here. Now as you can see, I still have my background which is locked. This is just a white background, no use for it really, but I always like to keep it on, and this is locked, so it can't be moved, it can't be edited, it's just there. The next picture I have is a picture of the Joker, the actor that plays the Joker, and I cannot pronounce his name, but I've resized this to fit. Now you can actually rename layers by double clicking. This is good practice to be able to see what each layer is and keep on top of your editing. I am just really lazy and never do this. This is really useful for these three layers here where the paper is stacked on one another. So really you should be calling this paper 1, paper 2 and paper 3. And just to repeat there, I just double clicked on the text to bring up the editing toolbar. I also have these two layers here These two layers have a clipping mask on them, which is why you have these little arrows here. And this becomes more apparent in the tutorial that I do on our YouTube channel. So with layers, the layer that is at the top is at the beginning, the very top of the image. So for example, this Joker here is above the actual picture of the Joker in costume. The picture of this Joker is above the text, and so on and so forth. Now, the way that this one has worked is that I have added a clipping mask, which is why it might look like it is lower, but I will open a new document now to show you what I mean. Okay, so moving on, I have an image here with two different layers, background and background copy. Now, background copy I have changed into black and white, and this is our top layer of the image. So at the moment, it's the only image you can see. I will show you how to do some layer masking in a moment, but for now, I'll just show you some simple tips and tricks that you can do with your layers. So if you right click on your layer, you come up with all of these different options. Now, to start off with, they might look a little bit confusing, but I'll go through some of the commonly used ones now. So to start off with, one of the really useful ones is duplicate layer, and this does exactly what it says it does. It duplicates your layer. So if I was to click that, you can duplicate it. You could rename it here, or you can rename it later, and it will bring up two of the same layer. This is an alternative to just copying and pasting the layer. It's really good practice to do this. If I right click again, we've got delete layer, which again completely deletes the layer. You've also got convert to smart object. This gives it a lot more opportunity for different techniques to use in Photoshop. So if any of them are grayed out on the toolbar at the top, that is probably why. Change it into a smart object and you'll get a lot more freedom. You have these three here, which all have different uses. Now, whenever we finish a Photoshop document, it's always a good idea to flatten your image. This combines all the layers together into one layer, which does mean that you can't edit it again, but it is useful for being able to save it as a JPEG rather than a Photoshop, and it makes your file size a lot smaller. Merge visible merges all the layers that are visible. So for example, if I was to duplicate this layer again, but then hide it and merge visible, it would only merge the layers that had the eye switched on and that we were able to see. And finally, merge down will merge with the layer underneath it. So for example, if I was going to duplicate this layer here and then merge down, it would merge with the layer underneath. So all of these are really useful in terms of different types of ways to merge layers, and obviously flattening an image is really important at the end of an editing process because, as I mentioned before, this will make your file size a lot smaller but also give you the ability to automatically save as a JPEG. However, this means that you can't go back in and edit, so don't do this until you are absolutely sure you are finished with your process. On here as well, we also have the ability to label layers with different colours. Now, this isn't useful if you're just doing a really simple editing technique with 2 or 3 layers, but if you are doing something a lot more complex that consists of maybe 10 or 15 layers, you can start to colour coordinate them if you like to be organised like that. And it will give each of the layers a colour. So you can group different parts of the image together, or you can highlight text as being one colour and individual images being different colours. It's entirely up to you, but that is useful to know. What you can also do with layers is your blending modes here. Now, there are loads of them and they all do different things, and they are split into different sections. Now, what I do with these blending modes on my particular image might be completely different to your own, but these are really good and beneficial to see how layering might work. So for example, if I click on overlay here, it creates this effect of like a high contrast but dark image, and this is because I have one that is black and white and one that is colour. Again, I could use saturation, won't do a lot. Lighten, which creates this almost pinky toned image. Darken creates a greeny tone image. But these are useful if you're working with layers and you want to have a little go with double exposure. Each individual type of blending mode will do something different to your image, so it is worth having a go with these and seeing how your image turns out. Another two options we have here are opacity and fill. Opacity will bring the layer out from underneath, so as you can see here, it started to add a little bit of colour, whereas fill will only affect the layer's content. So for example, if you had added an effect to this image, such as a drop shadow or a desaturation or something like that, it will affect all of it on the opacity, but on the fill layer it will only affect the content of the layer. Okay, now moving on to layer masking. Now, layer masking is a really useful technique to use if you are trying to erase parts of your image but you don't want it to be permanent, or you are likely to make a mistake. Now, this is useful, dare I say it, if you would like to do some selective colour with black and white, which I personally am not a fan of, and my students all know this. But it can be really beneficial for fashion projects or just for understanding how layer masks work. So what we need to do for this one, and this is useful for me to show you with a black and white picture on top and a colour picture underneath, is we first need to change our colour palette here so that our top layer is white and our bottom layer is black. Now make sure that these are the right colours, or else this will not work. I'm then going to grab my paintbrush here, make sure my hardness is set to 100 and that my opacity and flow are set to 100, and then we can start to paint. Now, your layer mask option is down here at the bottom. It's like a little rectangle with a circle in the middle, and when we click on that we get this white layer here, which is linked with our original black and white layer. Now, if I use a black paintbrush here and start to paint, you can start to see where it's bringing the colour back, but only where I'm painting. And as you can see on the layer here, it's tracked where I've painted with the black paintbrush to bring the colour back. Now you can start to see the khaki of the coat coming through. Could paint on the hair to bring some of that back, but all the while leaving the background as black and white. There we go. Now, I've not done this accurately, but if you wanted to get into it with a graphics tablet or something more specific, then you could do that as well. Now, there are options to reverse this as well. So for example, at the beginning I painted on the background by accident. You can't see it very well, but it sort of had a blue tint to it, and you can see it here in the background layer. What I'm going to do then is change the colour around again, flip my background and foreground, and paint over this again in white, and as you can see it turns it back into black and white. And I could do this perhaps with the hair here as well, and I could even have the hood in black and white. So it is really simple to chop and change between each of the layers. So if you do make a mistake or you want to bring something back, it's really simple to do so. Now, this is a lot more beneficial than just relying on getting it right first time, or edit and undo if you're working in layers and cutting things out and getting rid of stuff and erasing stuff. This is a much better technique, because if you, like I said, if you do make a mistake, you can just go back and change it. And I, for one, am always making mistakes. Now, this works on any image. You can stack layer masks, you can play around with different types of layer mask and blending images together and getting rid of backgrounds and stuff like that. But that is the safest way to use a layer mask. So as just a reminder, you need to have a pure black colour and a pure white colour, and these are in the corners here. You also need to click on the layer mask function down at the bottom here, which is a rectangle with a circle in the middle, and then you can start. If you are having problems with this or you're struggling, always check your opacity and your flow are on 100, and then make sure, like me, you have a proper brush on rather than one of these brushes if you were experimenting in the last video. Okay guys, and that's all for today's video. As always, if you do have any questions, then please let me know. I can try and link them into next week's video or week 4's video, which is all about troubleshooting and problems that you might have. But for now guys, I will see you next week. Bye!